Welcome to the Cold Cases. We're here discussing Eric Lee Franks, who mysteriously has disappeared, and his family is trying to find out what exactly happened to him or where he's at. And I'm here with his brother-in-law, Chad Boss. And so, Chad, who was Eric, first of all?
Well, yeah, like you said, Eric was my brother-in-law. I'm married to his sister, Beth, and Eric was I didn't know Eric for a lot of his life because I met his sister he was already an adult and had moved out of the house and whatnot like that.
Hmm.
So, um, but Eric was a real independent guy. He was living on his own pretty much right as soon as he could when he turned 18, as much as I know. He loved music. He really loved movies, and he had dreams of making it in some way in the movie business in California. And he actually moved there for a time, and just found. I mean, it's incredibly expensive to live in LA, and
Yeah.
didn't, that dream was kind of crushed by the reality of the economy and whatnot at the time. So he moved back
Yeah, it was around
to
2008, I
Tennessee.
believe, when he went out there and everything.
And I feel like it might have been even sooner than, no, it had to have been sooner than that.
Yeah.
I married Beth in 97, and
Oh, okay.
he had been in LA before that even. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was
Yeah, and what exactly, because some of the information I know that's out there is that, his car ended up, like 10 years later or something being somewhere else, and it's tied to this the care this woman was caretaking. You'll have to go into that, but
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I will just say before we even get into all that, I'm thankful for people like you that are wanting to try to get the word out about cold cases. There's actually you brought up the car, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but the whole because of true crime media, that's why we found the car, is because of
Oh,
true
wow.
crime media, and I will explain that, yeah, as we go. But so yeah, Eric, basically the progression that led him to Northwest Ohio, where I live, or Beth and I live, and then eventually to Michigan was this was during you mentioned 2008, the hard times with the
Hmm.
economy and whatnot. He was living in Mississippi at the time. That's where Beth's father had and their father had been born, and where his Eric's grandparents were, their grandparents. So he'd been living there. Um, yeah, everything with the economy. He'd been working at a mall, and just, it was hard times. He was hoping to come here and hoping that he'd find better opportunities for employment, better income and whatnot. But of course, it
Hmm.
turned out that downturn was everywhere. You weren't getting away from
Yeah.
it. And so, he struggled here in Northwest Ohio as well. He reconnected through the internet, through Facebook, with an old girlfriend. This had been a person that we've learned since then he really considered to be the love of his life, or the one that got away. There's been different phrases that he used about her, but her name was Kendra, and they had been together when he lived in Nashville, when the family lived in Nashville, and unbeknownst to him, and what he soon found out through Facebook, they actually had a child together. And he had never known about that. And by the time he found out about it, she was approximately 15 years old. And that's when
Oh, wow.
he found out during this reconnection with Kendra through Facebook. Kendra was living in Saginaw, Michigan, so four or so hours from where I live, where we live, where Eric was living at the time, and that led him on a path to wanting to reconnect with his daughter. Something else is that Eric was adopted, and so by Beth's parents, he always longed for, I think a lot of adopted people would say they long for biological connection. And they long for
Right.
to know their roots and know their biology. And so this when he found out about having a daughter, he was over the moon, kind of excited because,
I bet. Yeah.
somebody to be connected to. Yeah. So he wound up moving up to Saginaw then in the fall of 2010 to get reconnected with, well, to get connected with his daughter to start with. And then, of course, he was getting reconnected with Kendra.
Yeah.
So,
And that's when he went missing, and all this other stuff came out about, the car and all this other stuff happening, right?
right. So there was, again, I told you Eric was pretty independent. So it was not, he was always in touch with his mother, with Beth
Yeah.
and his mother, always in touch with her. But I wouldn't say it was definitely not daily. And I would say the same thing about myself when I lived in Nashville and my mom was here in Ohio. I was not in contact
Right.
with my mom daily, but they were always in touch. She, the family always knew where Eric was. And so, yeah, he was there that fall and through the winter into 2011. And we would get updates, specifically Beth and Eric's mom, Joanne, would get updates from Eric. And for a while there, it was Kendra wasn't so sure if she wanted him to meet their daughter. And then eventually we found out that he did meet their daughter, and then that they were spending, good amounts of time together. And
Yeah.
at the same time, Eric had been interested in rekindling this romantic relationship with Kendra. And according to him, she was talking about her own marriage being rocky and whatnot. And so, that's what we were getting from him, is that, he was probably picturing in his mind, this potential for just add water family,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we were getting these updates from him. However, in March of 2011 was the last time Joanne ever heard Eric's voice. And for a while, there was, again, because they didn't talk every day or even every week, there was, a delay in realizing something's wrong. Something's wrong. So, and about the time she would really start to get concerned, she actually started receiving emails from someone purportedly to be Eric. And she, so again, that would kind of just about the time the fire of concern would start burning really hot. An email would come to kind of throw water on things, right?
Yeah, that's another question I have with the emails,
Yeah.
is because I think when you send out an email, you can track the internet protocol address, the IP
Right.
address.
Yes.
Were they able to do any of that?
Well, unfortunately, no. And again, because of the delay, I mean, I shouldn't say no. They did track some of the email. They wound up tracking, however, it was just to a Burger King Wi-Fi. So the person using this phone was smart enough to go to a public Wi-Fi where it's not going to trace back to an individual. The only thing I will say is that Wi-Fi was on the way between two of Kendra's businesses. One was in Saginaw and one was farther south, if I recall, and Clio, Michigan was where that Burger King was. So the police did make note of that, and even in questioning her, they made note of the fact that, hey, that's right on the interstate, right on the way between your two stores or whatever. But and again, part of it was the delay. So there was a delay in the family realizing something's not right, and finally, by the water kept getting thrown on the flames of concern. However, in the fall then of 2011, Joanne finally got to the point where she's like, unless I hear your voice, I keep getting these emails and there's always an excuse, but unless I hear your voice, I'm calling the police. Okay. And of course, so she wound up doing so. Then there's a delay. So we've already gone from March, the last time, that anybody's seen or heard from him, to November. And then there's a delay of convincing the police that Eric is truly missing and not just an individual who's chosen to go somewhere on his own and not have contact with his family.
Right.
And you'll hear that a lot in missing persons cases and cold cases, that the police take a while to get convinced of that, and they're always going to point to, and they probably do have real examples of people who seem to disappear for a while, and then turns out that they just went somewhere and they didn't want their family to know where they were, and so we had months more of that before we got finally to the point where the police were ready to do the warrants that are necessary to pull his phone records and stuff like that. And it was at the point where a lot of that data is not kept forever. A lot of security camera footage is not kept forever. And so the trail was good and truly cold before they really started treating it as a missing persons case or as someone who had disappeared. It took way too long, but there were reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awful, because it seems to me that this case, a lot of it could have progressed, you know, better if there had been more involvement beforehand or something like that. And the thing is like Eric is still, nobody knows what happened to him, but I mean, you have clues such as, finding the car and, the people around it, but but what I read is that, for instance, Kendra has passed since then and stuff like that. So
That's right.
um yeah. So what we basically just need to find somebody who has some type of information about this, right? Um
Sure. Or, I mean, because Eric hasn't been found, I mean, certainly, we would, of course, there's always a desire for justice in a missing persons case. And we believe with everything in us that Eric is deceased, that his life was taken from him. We don't have any kind of, different missing persons cases. People might think, yeah, he might be out there somewhere. I mean, we have zero
right,
reason to think
right,
that, because in his entire life, he was never out of touch for anything, any length of time, let alone this kind of length of time.
right,
So finding him, I kept hoping that first few years. Well, a lot of times when hunting season comes, people will wind up being found in the woods because hunters are out in the woods more and stuff like that. So kept hoping for that. The car was missing for 10 years, as you brought up. So there was no Eric, there was no car, there was no sign of him whatsoever after that time period in March. And the police finally did start treating it as a missing persons case. And it did take longer than we wish, but I do understand. I try not to be particularly harsh or critical with law enforcement, because I'm sure they do see cases where family members become estranged and they just don't want to talk to each other, and somebody kind of disappears
right.
and doesn't tell people. So
Yeah,
it took some convincing and it took a while. And the other part, like I said, was whoever was sending those emails was smart enough to keep throwing water on the fire of concern, as I keep saying. So anyway,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And so, I mean, I can go into all kind of detail about that. I can fast forward to the car if you want, because you brought that up a couple of times.
Yeah.
The way that true crime media helped is, Eric's case was featured by NBC's show Disappeared. I don't know if you've seen
Hmm.
that show or not.
Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah, and so that, believe it or not, that show keeps running on reruns. I mean, we still all over the world, people reach out after that has been aired in different countries and everything else. So it's just amazing how many people have seen that. But so a person, when it first aired in the United States, a criminal justice student in California was a fan of that show. Her name's Randy
Hmm.
Hoffman. And Randy was watching that show, and she knew something. I'm a car dealer by trade. That's my family business.
Yeah.
I use Carfax every single day, but I never knew about a particular feature that Carfax has, which is you can enter a VIN number and have it email you when any records are updated related to that vehicle. Randy
Wow.
knew that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. Okay. She's a
Yeah.
criminal justice student. And so Randy because the VIN number was given, hey, we're looking for this car and everything else, Randy entered that number after watching Disappeared and had it email herself whenever, well, of course, nothing ever happened for years. So much
Yeah.
so that when she got an email several years later, and she was like, I don't even remember what is this about.
Yeah.
It took her a while to figure that out, and then she remembered, oh yeah, that what was his name, and then she remembered the case and everything.
Hmm.
And so I'm trying to remember the date. I think that was 20. I was looking here. So in 2018 is when she entered that information after watching Disappeared. And it was 2021, I believe, when she winds up getting an email Um, no, sorry, 2020. It's hard to remember. It's 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a long time though. Yeah.
Yeah, she gets that email. It's a couple years later, and so she reaches out to Joanne through the Facebook page. Find Eric Lee Franks is
Mm.
the Facebook page. Joanne, Eric's mother, maintains that page, and she reaches out and she says, "I just got this notice that this car, Eric's car, just got an oil change in Michigan." And it was in Clare, Michigan. So that was a couple hours away from Saginaw, where the car
Mm.
disappeared. My wife and I, Beth, happened to be on a trip in northern Michigan. And so we were going to be coming right through Clare on the way south to get back home. And so we kind of picked up and left and came straight down to Clare. We went to the dealership that had reported that they had changed the oil, told them our crazy story about, hey, we have been looking for this car. We told them the whole situation. And they said, well, before we tell the owner, we need to reach out to them. We know who has the car.
Yeah.
We need to reach out to them and get permission to give them your information. Well, it turned out the people that had it serviced there, it was actually a used car store. And so we drive over to the used car store and we go in this guy's office, and I didn't see the car on the lot, so I'm thinking it probably already sold and we're going to have another breadcrumb to follow as who bought the car. But we're sitting there, and the longer we're sitting there talking to the gentleman that owned the car store, he started talking about the car in a way that it was still, I'm like, is it still here? Like, because I thought it was gone,
Wow.
and he goes, yeah, it's right in the next room here. And we get up and walk around the corner, and there sits
Oh
Eric
my gosh.
after
Oh
10
my
years,
gosh.
looking basically like the last day I saw it, because
Yeah.
they had already detailed and cleaned it all up. And the last time
Hmm.
I saw it, we had actually sold that car to Joanne's mother, and we had cleaned it all up before it went to her. So I mean, it looked a
Yeah.
lot like the day it left. Yeah, it was crazy,
Yeah.
real. So
Now was the now that was now that was the Kendra's caretaker that it belonged to,
correct.
or who she took care of. I
Well,
believe
yeah.
is.
Yeah, so that's what we come to find out. The car salesman was explaining where he bought the car. He bought the car in
Hmm.
an estate sale, and the story was that the man was an invalid who wasn't able to care for himself, and he had caretakers. And so when they found the car in the garage, there was no keys for it, and they couldn't find a title for it. And so, unbeknownst to them, it should have flagged, and it's been missing for 10 years, and it's been in the law enforcement database as stolen. But because of an error on the part of the Michigan State Police, it got deleted out of the database.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and
Yeah.
so that's why they weren't notified when the car got titled to this dealer.
Hmm.
If it
Oh,
wasn't
I see.
if it wasn't for that oil change,
Yeah.
it might be driving around right now and we might not know it. But it got, that because it wasn't in the law enforcement system at all.
Yeah.
It had been, but it had been taken out basically. And so yes, the person whose garage it was in, who is deceased, his name was Gerald Rutledge. Kendra and her husband John's business was adult foster care and adult daycare, and Gerald Rutledge was one of their clients. And Gerald Rutledge had been frequently at the same place they would take, Kendra would often take Gerald roller skating. He liked to roller
Hmm.
skate. I know I told you he was an invalid. I'm not sure he was physically disabled, but he had issues that
Right.
he
Right.
had to have help with.
Right. Right.
Anyway, he liked to go to the roller skating rink. They would take him. That's where Eric would often meet Emily and Kendra, at the roller skating rink with Gerald. So,
Yeah. And
there was very much a tie between those two people and Eric. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but you guys kind of have a good idea of like who was involved in that kind of stuff, right?
Well,
So,
I mean,
you know,
I think, Kendra's deceased. I think there hasn't been a lot of question in our minds for a very long time, and I think the police have questioned a lot of people more as background, but I would they'd probably call them, I don't know what they'd call them, persons of interest or suspects or whatever,
Right,
but
right,
they've questioned them multiple times. They just here recently went to Florida to re-question her husband, John, just last month. Um,
right.
I haven't talked
Okay,
about that publicly anywhere yet until telling you
okay.
that. So yeah, and because of the direct tie, I mean, between that Eric's car and that house and their business caring for the man who lived in that house, um, it's really hard to imagine that if Kendra had been alive when we found the car, that wouldn't have been enough to arrest her at that point. Um, However, she was not alive when we found the car, and
Right,
it's a little bit, more difficult. Obviously, there's tons of circumstantial evidence, but circumstantial evidence
right.
doesn't
Unfortunately,
make doesn't
so
make a
that's
conviction.
that's why we have to get these stories out, is so that we can get more than circumstantial evidence.
Right,
Like for instance, with the car, if they had found the car earlier,
right.
stuff like that.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and yeah, even and they did forensically process the car, but the car had been detailed again. So they found a few drops of blood, which did test as Eric's blood, but it wasn't in any way substantial enough to indicate foul play. It was, it could have been a hangnail, a nosebleed. We,
Yeah,
we all bleed
yeah,
sometimes, so there was nothing to indicate that level of anything happened in the car per se. But again,
right.
it had been detailed, and who knows what else they might have found had it not been 10 years, like you said, that car had been here.
Yeah, yeah.
Fingerprints certainly would have been destroyed after all that time, and
Right,
having
right.
been detailed and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna leave it at that.